The cafe never truly slept. Even after midnight, when the city outside slowed to a tired crawl, the place carried a quiet pulse. Soft humming refrigerators, the faint clink of cups, the low buzz of fluorescent lights fighting exhaustion just like the people beneath them. And every night, Ayla was there. She moved carefully between tables, wiping away crumbs left behind by strangers who never noticed her hands. Hands that worked without complaint. Hands that had learned to keep moving so the heart wouldn't think too much. She had memorized the cafe's rhythm. Which chair wobbled, which table had a burn mark from years ago, which corner stayed warm even in winter. She knew the sound of the doorbell when someone came in, and the silence when no one ever came looking for her. Ayla was 28, but life had aged her far beyond that. Not with wrinkles, but with restraint. She smiled when required. She spoke when spoken to. She disappeared when not needed. Loneliness wasn't new to her. It had grown beside her like a shadow, quiet, patient, faithful. She used to believe loneliness meant being alone. Now she knew better. Loneliness meant being surrounded by people who never truly saw you. Most nights were the same. Office workers tapping phones. Couples whispering secrets she would never hear. Students laughing loudly, pretending the future wasn't terrifying. They all came and went. Ayla stayed. She cleaned the same tables. Collected the same cups. Watched the same door. And then, one evening, the routine shifted. The bell rang again. A man stepped inside, holding the hand of a small boy. They paused just inside the doorway, as if deciding whether they truly belonged there. The boy looked around with wide eyes, fascinated by everything: the glowing menu board, the pastry display, the ceiling fans. The man scanned the room differently, carefully, as if calculating safety, cost, and comfort all at once. Ayla noticed him immediately, not because he was handsome, though there was a quiet strength to him, but because of the way his shoulders carried invisible weight. This was a man who had learned to be careful. The boy tugged at his hand. "Dad, can we sit there?" The man nodded, smiling faintly. They chose the corner table. From that night on, that table became theirs. The man's name was Daniel. Ayla didn't know that yet. She only knew that he always ordered the same thing. Black coffee for himself. Warm milk with honey for the boy. Always polite. Always soft-spoken. Never rushed. Daniel listened to his son like time wasn't chasing him. That was rare. Most parents scrolled phones. Most spoke over children. Most were somewhere else. But Daniel leaned forward, asked questions, laughed quietly. The boy, Eli, talked about everything. School, dinosaurs, how clouds looked like broken castles, how he missed his mom. Every time Eli said that, Daniel's jaw tightened for just a second. Just long enough for Ayla to notice. She noticed more than people realized. Because when you live quietly, you learn to observe loudly. Night after night, they returned. Rain or cold, weekdays or weekends, it didn't matter. They sat in the same corner, ordered the same drinks, stayed until the cafe nearly closed. Ayla never intruded. She refilled water, cleared plates, offered napkins. Their conversations floated just beyond her reach. But sometimes, when Eli laughed too loudly, Daniel glanced up. And their eyes met, just for a moment. No words, no smiles, just two people acknowledging another presence in the room. Ayla looked away first. She always did. Because eye contact felt dangerous. Because connection asked questions she didn't know how to answer. At home, Ayla lived alone in a small apartment above a laundromat. The walls were thin. The nights were long. The silence followed her home. She used to imagine voices. People asking how her day was. But imagination eventually hurts more than truth. Her past was something she kept folded neatly away. A mother who left early. A father who disappeared quietly. A childhood that taught her to depend on no one. She learned early that expectations led to disappointment. So she expected nothing. And that made surviving easier. Until Daniel and Eli. Until the way Daniel brushed his son's hair behind his ear. Until the way he whispered, "It's okay, I've got you." Words Ayla had never heard directed at her. One night, the cafe was unusually empty. The rain had scared customers away. Ayla wiped the counter slowly, watching water race down the windows. Eli was drawing on a napkin, tongue poking out in concentration. Daniel watched him, smiling, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. He looked tired, not the kind of tired sleep could fix. The kind that settles in the bones. Ayla brought their drinks over. As she set the cups down, Eli looked up. "Miss," he said brightly, "do you like dinosaurs?" Ayla froze. Customers rarely spoke to her directly. And never with curiosity. I think they're interesting," she replied carefully. Eli grinned. "My favorite is the T-Rex, but Dad says they're misunderstood." Daniel chuckled softly. "They're not monsters," he said. "They were just trying to survive." Ayla felt something tighten in her chest. Survive. That word followed her everywhere. She nodded and stepped back. But something had changed. The silence between them felt thinner. That night, as Daniel paid the bill, he hesitated. His fingers rested on the counter longer than necessary. "Thank you," he said. Not the automatic kind. The kind that meant something. Ayla met his eyes. "You're welcome," she replied. It was the longest exchange they'd had. After that, Daniel started noticing her too. The way she moved quietly. The way she flinched when someone raised their voice. The way she always worked twice as hard without complaint. He noticed the loneliness because it looked familiar. He had worn it himself for years. As weeks passed, something unspoken grew. Not romance. Not friendship. Recognition. Two people standing on opposite sides of invisible glass. Both afraid to knock. One evening, Eli fell asleep at the table. Daniel lifted him gently, resting the boy's head against his shoulder. Ayla watched from across the room. The way Daniel adjusted his jacket so Eli wouldn't get cold. The way he whispered, "I've got you." Her throat tightened. She turned away quickly, pretending to clean. Because watching love, even the quiet kind, reminded her of everything she had learned not to want. Daniel stood to leave. As he passed her, he slowed. He wanted to say something. Anything. But words are dangerous when hearts are fragile. So he nodded instead. Ayla nodded back, and they returned to their silence. But it was no longer empty. It was full of questions waiting to be asked. And neither of them knew that soon. One question, spoken at the wrong time or the right one, would change everything. Chapter 2. The night it happened didn't announce itself. There was no music swelling in the background. No dramatic pause in the air. It was an ordinary evening. The kind Ayla had lived through 1,000 times. The café was half full. The city outside hummed with distant traffic. Rain threatened but hadn't yet fallen. Daniel and Eli arrived later than usual. Ayla noticed immediately. Daniel's shoulders were tense, his jaw set tighter than she'd ever seen it. Eli was quieter too, clutching his backpack instead of talking about dinosaurs or school. They took their usual corner table. Black coffee, warm milk with honey, routine pretending to be stability. Ayla carried their drinks over. Careful not to spill, careful not to look too closely. But when she placed the cup in front of Daniel, their fingers brushed. It was brief, accidental, still, something passed between them. Daniel pulled his hand back first. "Sorry," he murmured. "It's okay," Ayla replied. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. She walked away, but her heart didn't follow. For the first time since she'd known him, Daniel didn't immediately turn his attention back to Eli. He stared into his coffee as if it might offer answers. Eli swung his legs beneath the table. "Dad," he said quietly, "are you sad again?" Daniel blinked. "No, buddy," he said quickly. Too quickly. "Just tired." Eli nodded, unconvinced. Ayla pretended not to hear, but the words lodged inside her chest. Sad again. Later that night, Eli fell asleep with his head resting on the table, his small fingers curled around a crumpled napkin covered in drawings. Ayla dimmed the lights slightly, something she wasn't supposed to do yet. Daniel noticed. "Thank you," he said softly. She nodded. Time stretched. The cafe emptied. Only the hum of machines and the quiet breathing of a sleeping child remained. Daniel stood slowly, careful not to wake Eli. He lifted his son into his arms with practiced ease, adjusting his jacket around the boy's shoulders. As he turned toward the counter to pay, he stopped. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the way the silence pressed too hard tonight. Maybe it was the realization that if he didn't speak now, he never would. Ayla stood behind the counter, organizing receipts that didn't need organizing. Daniel cleared his throat. "Ayla," he said. She looked up sharply. It startled her, not just that he spoke, but that he knew her name. "Yes." He hesitated. Words crowded his mind, each one too heavy, too revealing. He chose the smallest one. "Can I ask you something?" Her hands froze. People asked her questions all the time. "Is the restroom open? Can I get extra sugar?" This was different. She nodded slowly. Daniel shifted Eli's weight in his arms. "Do you ever feel invisible?" he asked, his voice low, "even when you're standing right in front of people?" The world tilted. Ayla's breath caught so sharply it hurt. No one had ever asked her that. Not like this. Not with understanding already in their eyes. For a moment, she couldn't speak. The cafe felt too quiet. Too exposed. She searched for a safe answer. A polite answer. But something inside her, tired of being silent, rose up. "Yes," she said. The word came out bare. "Honest." Daniel exhaled, a sound caught somewhere between relief and pain. "My wife," he began, then stopped. Ayla waited. "She died 2 years ago," he continued quietly. "Cancer. Fast. Too fast." Ayla swallowed. "I promised myself I'd never let Eli feel alone," Daniel said. "But some days, some nights, I don't even recognize myself anymore." His voice cracked, just slightly. "I go to work. I pack lunches. I read bedtime stories. I do everything I'm supposed to do. And still, I feel like I'm disappearing." Ayla stepped out from behind the counter without thinking. She pulled out a chair. "Sit," she said. Daniel hesitated. Rules existed for people like her. But tonight, she didn't care. He sat. Eli stirred but didn't wake. Ayla folded her hands together. "I grew up learning not to expect anything," she said slowly. "If you don't expect love, it can't leave you." Daniel looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. "And did it work?" he asked. She shook her head. "No," she said. "It just made me very good at pretending I don't need it." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Eli shifted, murmuring in his sleep. Ayla smiled despite herself. "He's a good kid," she said. "He saved me," Daniel replied. Ayla met his eyes. "So did you," she said softly. "Even if you don't know it yet." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then decided to be brave. "You come in here every night," she said. "You sit in that corner. You listen to your son like he's the most important person in the world. You remind me that kindness still exists." Daniel looked down. "I thought I was failing," he whispered. Ayla shook her head. "No," she said. "You're surviving, and that matters." At that moment, Eli woke up. He blinked sleepily, then smiled when he saw Ayla. "Did I miss anything?" he asked. Ayla laughed softly. "Just grown-up stuff." Eli studied her face seriously. "You look less sad tonight," he said. Her throat tightened. "So do you," she replied. Daniel stood to leave, lifting Eli once more. At the door, he turned back. "Would you like to join us sometime?" he asked. "Not here. Maybe the park. Eli could show you his dinosaurs." Ayla's first instinct was to say no. Fear whispered familiar warnings. But then she remembered the question. The one that changed everything. "I'd like that," she said. Daniel smiled. Not politely, not carefully, but genuinely. As the door closed behind them, Ayla stood alone in the cafe. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. And sometimes, that's where healing begins.